Hello everyone. Welcome back. Today, we've got some crucial news you don't want to miss. Let's dive right into the top financial headlines and break down what's happening. Let's take a look at the financial headlines for today. According to a report from CNBC, as expected, the key inflation rate reached 2.1% in September, nearing the Federal Reserve's target. Today, the U.S. Department of Commerce released data on personal consumption expenditures, PCE, for September. After seasonal adjustments, the PCE price index showed a month-over-month increase of 0.2%. Year-over-year, inflation stands at 2.1%. Both the month-over-month and year-over-year PCE price index figures met Wall Street's expectations, leading to a positive market reaction. However, the core inflation rate, which reflects the core PCE price index, saw a year-over-year increase of 2.7% and a month-over-month increase of 0.3%. These numbers are also in line with prior Wall Street forecasts. In addition, the U.S. Labor Department released a report on initial unemployment claims. For the week ending October 26, the number of new claims totaled 216,000, a decrease of 12,000 from the previous week and significantly lower than Wall Street's prediction of 230,000. This suggests that the labor market remains robust and healthy. The Labor Department also provided data on personal income growth, showing a 0.3% increase in September, slightly above the August figures and meeting expectations. Consumer spending rose by 0.5%, exceeding forecasts by 0.1%. Since consumer spending accounts for over 71% of the U.S. economy, this data is quite encouraging for the market. On the downside, the personal savings rate dropped to 4.6%, the lowest level this year, which may indicate reduced spending capacity in the future. Additionally, the Labor Department reported an employment cost index that grew by 0.8% in the third quarter, falling short of expectations by 0.1%. Year-over-year, wages and benefits increased by 3.9%. Wall Street generally views this as a positive outcome, especially since the consumer price index rose only by 2.4%. This indicates that income growth outpaced price increases, though this conclusion may vary based on individual experiences and different sectors. Overall, as we approach the elections, today's data is seen as decent by Wall Street, neither particularly good nor bad. Tomorrow, we'll see an even more critical release, the October non-farm payrolls report, which is a key focus for American society. We will also get insights into the unemployment rate and labor force participation rate. If these figures exceed expectations, they could subtly influence the election outcomes. So, let's keep an eye on tomorrow's non-farm data. The second important economic news comes from the U.S. Department of Commerce, which released the GDP data for the third quarter. This announcement generated quite a stir. Bloomberg reported the headline, U.S. economy expands at 2.8% rate, powered by resilient consumer, with the subheading noting that consumer spending rose 3.7%, marking the largest increase since the beginning of 2023. However, the growth in third-quarter GDP was constrained by a widening trade deficit, which is a general assessment of today's data. Now, let's focus on the Wall Street Journal's coverage. Their headline reads, U.S. economic growth extends solid streak, noting that the GDP growth rate slightly slowed to 2.8% from the previous quarter's 3%. According to the Department of Commerce, after adjusting for seasonal and inflationary factors, the U.S. GDP grew at an annual rate of 2.8% in the third quarter. GDP serves as a broad measure of economic production in goods and services. It's essential to understand how GDP is viewed in the context of developed economies. Unlike many emerging markets, GDP is not considered the most crucial macroeconomic indicator in developed countries. That title typically goes to employment or unemployment rates. The reason is that GDP does not measure wealth accumulation directly, instead, it reflects the level of economic activity. While higher economic activity often indicates increased output and can correlate with wealth growth, it's important to analyze these figures critically. GDP doesn't necessarily equate to increased capacity or wealth. The Wall Street Journal further explains that the growth rate in Q3 slowed slightly from the 3% growth in Q2, falling short of economists' expectations of 3.1%. Nonetheless, the period from July to September still signifies a continuation of the U.S. economy's robust growth momentum over the past 2 years, despite borrowing costs being at historic highs. This is a crucial point. The current benchmark interest rate in the US is above 5%. For commercial loans, even the best rates hover around 8%, which is quite extraordinary. Many businesses struggle to achieve after-tax net profits of 8% to 10%, making GDP growth in such a high-interest environment particularly challenging. The report was released just 7 days before the presidential election, where the economy is likely to be a pivotal issue for both candidates. Economists tend to believe that Vice President Kamala Harris may perform better in controlling the deficit and inflation. Voters often view former President Trump's handling of the economy positively. Currently, the strategies of both parties are as follows. Democrats aim to steer economic discussions toward positive indicators, while Republicans seek to highlight the significant price increases over the past few years, blaming Democrats for these issues. Thus, the release of key economic data before the election is particularly significant and could subtly influence the election outcome, though each side interprets the data differently. Next, let's dive into some key updates about the election. First up, we have the top political story from mainstream media today, reported by the NBC News. The headline reads, Supreme Court allows Virginia to purge voter rolls ahead of the election. The subheading notes that the state wants to remove non-citizens from the voter rolls, but challengers said it pulls in lawful voters, too, and that it is too close to the election, in violation of federal law. Virginia has now cancelled the registrations of about 1,600 residents, and here's why this is making headlines. There's been a long-standing debate in the US about whether some people who aren't citizens are registering to vote and even casting ballots. The question is, how prevalent is this issue, and is there a way to stop these so-called fake voters? Some even argue that the US should issue voter IDs to every citizen to prevent this. Virginia has officially requested to remove individuals they believe are not US citizens from the voter rolls. However, when local courts reviewed this decision, judges disagreed and paused the government's actions, citing a federal law that imposes a 90-day quiet period before elections. This lawsuit then made its way to the Supreme Court, which acted unusually quickly. Today, the court ruled that lower courts should not block the government's decision, meaning those 1,600 voters will not be reinstated. This ruling has sparked more debate in Virginia. The core issue revolves around how the state decided to remove these individuals. They used information from the DMV, where people register for driver's licenses, to compare voter registrations. Some individuals may have mistakenly indicated they weren't citizens when applying for their licenses, even though they are now citizens. This leads to a gray area: who really should be removed from the voter rolls? Previously, this topic wasn't as controversial. But back on August 7th, Virginia's governor signed a new executive order mandating that the state's election office update voter registration lists daily, including removing names based on DMV data. This new directive has stirred up fresh conflict. Alabama has seen a similar situation. The state's Republican Secretary of State wanted to remove over 3,000 people from the voter list, but a federal judge intervened, keeping those individuals on the rolls. Unlike Virginia, Alabama hasn't appealed this decision. Now, moving on to the second update related to the election, Bloomberg reported that Trump's momentum with Muslims threatens Harris' lead in Michigan. The subheading explains how Republicans are trying to pull voters back on issues related to Gaza. This is particularly interesting because, following the Gaza conflict this year, there's been a split among Democratic voters, especially in Michigan, which is a key swing state. Historically, Democrats have backed certain foreign policies in the Middle East, but now there's a significant divide. Some Muslim voters feel President Biden hasn't taken a strong enough stance to support Hamas or aid Israel, which has frustrated many in the community. Local Muslim leaders in Michigan are saying they won't vote for Democrats this time around. They might not support Trump either, but not voting for Democrats could inadvertently boost Trump's chances. So, are these Muslim voters more open to Trump's leadership? The report raises some interesting questions. While Trump previously attempted to ban people from several Muslim-majority countries from entering the US, he's now garnered some support from Muslim and Arab American voters in Michigan. For instance, he won the backing of the first Muslim mayor in Dearborn Heights, along with support from Imam Bilal Bashar in the Detroit area. When reporters asked Imam al-Juri about this shift, he said he doesn't want to dwell on the past. As of now, there are over 300,000 voters of Middle Eastern or North African descent in Michigan. On the flip side, some voters who once strongly supported Trump are now backing Harris, though they're a smaller group, about 100,000 Jewish voters who generally favor Harris, alongside 600,000 Polish Americans who are also leaning toward her due to concerns over Trump's shift in support for Ukraine. This is shaping up to be a dramatic election in Michigan, especially for Muslim voters. The Wall Street Journal cites a poll showing a significant rise in support for Trump among Muslim voters nationwide. A major survey indicated that 45% of Arab Americans support Trump compared to 43% for Harris. In previous elections, about 60% of Arab Americans typically backed the Democratic candidate. So, this year, we're seeing some surprising shifts in Muslim and Arab voter sentiment. Next, let's talk about some news coming out of Russia. According to a Reuters report, the headline reads, "Kremlin says Ukraine must be nervous if it's asking for US Tomahawk missiles." Today, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters that the situation on the front lines is clear. He claimed that Russia has made its fastest advances in 2 years over the past 3 months, which has caused some anxiety in Kiev. So what does this really mean? It seems that the New York Times leaked some significant information indicating that Ukraine, while discussing a victory plan with the US, included confidential requests for Tomahawk missiles. Yesterday, Ukrainian President Zelensky expressed his frustration over the leak, questioning how such sensitive information made it to the New York Times. He suggested that there are some elements within the US government that are anti-Ukrainian. In response, Russia didn't directly warn the US against supplying these missiles. Instead, they mocked Ukraine, implying that the need for Tomahawks indicates a lack of confidence and failures on the battlefield. This news highlights the complexities of the war in Ukraine and reflects the mixed feelings within the US regarding support for Ukraine. Personally, I find Peskov's claim about Russia's rapid advancements over the last 3 months hard to believe. Some informed users in the comments might provide more insights, but my skepticism comes from the fact that if things are really going that well for Russia, then how did they lose control of Kursk? That doesn't sound like a victory to me. This story also reveals some of Russia's anxieties as they try to exaggerate their successes. Fifth, let's dive into an important story that's grabbing attention in the international finance world today. Bloomberg reports that a former employee of Nomura Securities was arrested for attempted murder of a couple who were clients of the firm. According to Japan's Kyodo News, this ex-employee was taken into custody on charges of robbery and attempted murder against an elderly couple. The incident, which took place in Hiroshima back in July, involves a 29-year-old man who worked in Nomura's private investment division. He allegedly drugged the couple, stole about 26 million yen, around $175,000, and then set their house on fire. Thankfully, the couple, both in their 80s, managed to escape the blaze unharmed. So why is this story making waves in major financial media today? It's pretty shocking and speaks to broader issues in the industry. The Wall Street Journal actually featured an even more outrageous story on its front page. It involves a well-known investor who allegedly blackmailed the Argentine government by threatening to cause a financial crisis unless they paid him $6 billion. He used insider knowledge from his work as a financial advisor to leverage this threat. Both of these stories highlight a critical point: even when dealing with trusted financial advisors, you have to be cautious. It's easy for someone who provides personalized service to take advantage of clients once they realize they have significant assets. We see similar cases where insurance agents or investment advisors deceive clients once they identify them as potential targets. The takeaway here is to stay vigilant when interacting with your financial advisors. These types of incidents, while shocking, are not as rare as you might think. Lastly, we're sharing 2 interesting stories today. First up is a piece from The Economist titled "North Korea's Aid to Russia Raises Difficult Questions in China." It looks like North Korea is sending troops to Russia to participate in the Ukraine war, and that's putting Chinese President Xi Jinping in a bit of a tough spot. Several international outlets are buzzing about this, and it seems to be making things awkward for Xi. The report suggests that Chinese officials are worried about losing influence over their neighbor. While they're avoiding direct comments on North Korea sending thousands of troops to Russia, they might be questioning Kim Jong-un's move in private. Just a day after the US claimed to have evidence of North Korean troops in Russia, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said they had no information on it. A Chinese journalist even vented on Weibo, suggesting it showed a lack of respect from North Korea towards Xi. Another influential voice, commentator Chiu Zhenhai from Phoenix TV, took it a step further. He pointed out that the biggest loser in this situation is China, expressing concern that Russia might help North Korea in a potential conflict on the Korean peninsula as a way to repay Kim's support. That could lead to a serious situation right in China's backyard, which is something they definitely want to avoid. Analysts are pretty unanimous that North Korea leaning towards Russia is frustrating for China. Since last year, Kim and Putin have been visiting each other, leading to North Korea supplying Russia with artillery and missiles in exchange for economic and military support from Russia. Interestingly, signs are showing that Kim's attitude towards China is cooling off. For example, North Korea didn't send any high-ranking officials to a recent event in Pyongyang celebrating the anniversary of their treaty with China. Analysts noted that the exchange of congratulatory messages for their 75th anniversary was shorter than in previous years. Western media, including The Economist, has been highlighting Xi's discomfort. He's being sidelined and humiliated but can't really lash out. He has to keep up the appearance that he has a good relationship with Kim. This has stirred quite a bit of dissatisfaction among Chinese netizens. Now, onto the second part. How is the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, viewing this whole North Korea situation? They might not say much publicly, but internally, they have their own take. Hong Kong 01, a key CCP media outlet, recently reported on this issue, discussing how North Korea sending troops to aid Russia could impact China-Europe relations. During a visit from the Finnish president, he brought up the North Korean troops with Xi, emphasizing that this kind of support threatens European security. The president pointed out that since China has good relations with North Korea, they should do something about it, otherwise, they're complicit in a security threat to Europe. This exchange put Xi in a tricky spot. He's trying to maintain a facade of not being bothered, but now, with Europe highlighting the issue, he might have to publicly address it. The article outlined that the CCP is faced with two main principles moving forward. First, they can't abandon North Korea due to its strategic importance, no matter how much Western countries protest. Second, they need to ease European concerns by downplaying their relationship with North Korea, essentially admitting they can't control Kim. The big question remains, can these strategies alleviate the pressure from the US and Europe? This situation is definitely presenting a significant challenge for Xi, caught between maintaining his image and dealing with Kim's unpredictable behavior. That's all for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more updates. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.